What's up, Chop?
What's up, Q? Today's episode is sponsored by
Amazon Prime and Amazon Video.
Get your 30-day free trial, and you can find the links under the description. Enjoy. And we're live.
What's up, everybody? This is Q and Chop, chopping it up.
Today we got Dr. Krista Austin today.
Dr. Krista Austin is a sports scientist currently serving as a performance specialist for professional and Olympic sport athletes and industry consultant. Austin has worked for the United States Olympic Committee, the English Institute of Sport, England's cricket team, and multiple national governing bodies of sport. Her wide range of expertise includes developing high-performance plans, consulting for professional sport teams, preparing athletes for the NFL Combine, endurance code training systems. In addition, she has consulted for Ironman, Michael Johnson Performance, Tridot, Massimo, and Hutchinson Technology.
Krista, how are we doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Staying blessed, staying inside.
Yeah, me too.
So, Krista, let the listeners know who you are.
So my name's Krista Austin. I am a sports scientist, and about 20 years ago now, a little over 20 years ago, I started an internship with the United States Olympic Committee, and I started that in strength and conditioning, and it morphed into my becoming a physiologist, and a physiologist that accidentally ended up specializing in endurance sport, especially the interaction between training and nutrition. And during that time, I was really fortunate to meet a lot of great athletes and begin specializing in sports that I didn't come from. I was a tennis player by nature and a gymnast prior to that. And so over time, I've done a lot of different work. I've worked in England for the English Institute of Sport, came back across the pond and went to work for the United States Olympic Committee, and then a variety of national governing bodies of sport. I've done some work with the military in their special operations aspects and studied a lot of things with regards to their use of dietary supplements. And then on a day-to-day basis, I am a consultant and a sports scientist who helps to train athletes and help them optimize their nutrition, and also work with them on key, what we call medical aspects, such as relative energy deficiency syndrome, which is pretty common in endurance athletes. And we can address that quite substantially with exercise and nutrition modification.
Wow.
That's incredible. Internship, straight to the Olympic. That's really good to be an intern. To back you up as working there instead of working at a mom and pop gym, and it's crazy.
Well, life is sometimes really serendipitous, they say. I had a friend in college who was actually playing volleyball for USA Volleyball. I believe she was on the B team. And she was down there for various camps, things of that nature. And it's how I actually got introduced to the United States Olympic Committee and the internships they had the potential to offer. And I was just fortunate that they gave me the opportunity to, do those internships. And while I was there, I made sure that I performed. And they said, hey, if you're going to stick around and do your master's at San Diego State and you want to keep learning, then we're going to give you that opportunity. So I think I was very fortunate to end up down there. So,
like they say, it's all about who you know. So that definitely helped out a lot, man. I really was interested in you working with the special operations. I went to a military college, and I've thought about that myself, doing special ops. But I think that's pretty cool that you can that you got to work with them.
Yeah, they're a different population. They're definitely not, we should never think of them like we think of athletes, especially elite athletes, because their job is completely different. And it warrants a very different mindset. But I think they absolutely deserve the attention that an elite athlete gets, and giving them the right resources so that they can stay healthy and do their job to the best of their abilities, and really just have that support to keep their career going and make sure it's as, smooth as possible. Sometimes it gets a little tumultuous for those guys just because of what they do. And so by nature, it's was, a little bit more, not advantageous, but just a little bit more edgy, I guess you could say. And I think, support for those guys is just as important as it is for an athlete. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna recap with that, with what you guys said, and the chance was there, the ability was there, so you took it, a lot of people miss that, they don't see the opportunity that they have in front of them, and then they don't take it, but you took it, and you built from that, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I will tell you, my entire career, I always tried to find things that would help me grow that were not textbook orientated. And I had to take a lot of opportunities that most people just won't invest in, including going and meeting, elite coaches, going into their camps just to really learn and understand how they did things and see how it could help me grow and what I was trying to bring to the table. And I think that's the biggest thing to teach today's young people is they'll call me and they'll say, I want to do what you do. And I said, okay, well, it's not very exciting sometimes, a lot of sacrifice, and people don't always realize you have to take certain opportunities and try to see what you can turn them into.
That's very true. Some people don't like to go out and, into the real world and just swing it, you gotta go do stuff, you gotta sacrifice a lot of time and, but some people just don't want to do it, and that's what they don't get for in life. So how did you get involved in distance running? I remember you come from a tennis player, but how did you get involved with distance running?
So when I was at the United States Olympic Committee as an intern, there were two athletes down there as part of the actual development program. Those were Meb Keflezighi and Dina Castor. And as a result of that internship, I was able to actually keep engaging with those athletes for a prolonged period of time, especially Meb. And so what would happen is that as we learned to develop, again, distance running in the U.S., I was able to be a part of that. And the coaches, especially Dr. Joe Vigil and Coach Bob Larson, would allow me to engage so that I could learn and really begin to understand what these athletes needed. And it's only been through engaging in that manner that I've been able to develop the skills necessary to help our elite distance runners whenever they come to me. So I'm really seen as kind of this resource that they can go tap into that has a lot of knowledge and can help them address whatever area of distance running it is. And it typically varies for each of them. They come with different circumstances and different needs. But because I've been doing it for so many years and had the ability to learn from a lot of great athletes and coaches, that's how I ended up staying in the sport of distance running.
Wow, yeah, experience is definitely the best teacher.
Yeah.
And I heard you mention Meb, and years ago you helped rebuild. How did you know it could be rebuilt?
Well, one of the things that I was able to look at with Meb is just his running stride. Okay. And one of the things I noticed about Meb's running stride is that he didn't have a real hiccup when it was short periods of time. And my whole perspective on that was that the natural ability just wasn't there for as long as we needed it to be there. And so when that's the case, what we have to do is figure out why is it that they can't carry it over prolonged distances. And so I looked at it. I asked him if he wanted to stay going, and he said yes. So when the athlete says, I want to keep going, then you turn around and try to figure out a way to make that happen. And I just truly believed that when looking back over his records and talking to him, I said, you know what? We just haven't done a great job maintaining this athlete. So let's go kind of, take him to the car shop, right? Like we do our vehicles, and do an all systems check. And when we take a look at that system, each component of it, do we have things that we can modify and therefore keep this athlete in the game? So it pretty much just was based off really knowing the athlete and seeing that the actual ability to run was not compromised. It was just he couldn't do it for prolonged periods of time without his legs just kind of shutting down on him.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's deep.
That's deep.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But okay, that got me really interested. So when you're gonna take an athlete to the shop, what do you look for? Like, what do you guys do? Like an extensive like monitor him like for a couple of days and go back to his workouts, or you watch film on his running, or that really interests me a lot. Like I really would like to know like what do you guys look at when Meb was all right? It's like he wanted to go again, but what do you guys look for?
So we start first and foremost with, what can the athlete tell us and what system does it indicate that might not be working well, right? And so when you talk to Meb, he said, "Oh, I feel good. It's not that I don't feel unhealthy. They're eating well. We take a look at, are they eating everything that they need to?" And, we had a long history of, blood chemistry and other various tests on him that said, he was a healthy athlete. And so we turned around and just said, okay, he's telling us that he cannot sustain his running velocity despite the will to do it. And so he said, it's just like my legs are kind of shutting off on me. So we did everything we could to actually assess why would his legs be kind of shutting down on him. So we did, surface EMG. We did a video that's called high speed video. And really we could break down every single frame to take a look at what was actually going on with his stride. And when we did that, we kind of just said, look, he's for some reason just not recruiting the muscle fibers like he needs to. And there was a muscle aspect where, because he was recruiting something called his TFL to do a lot of the running, and it's this very tiny, ligament muscular aspect of the legs, we said, well, he's not recruiting his glutes. He's not recruiting the right muscular properties to actually do the running. We think we can actually correct this. And so with him, it wasn't that it was overly complicated. It's just we needed to be able to go in and pinpoint what exactly was going on. And so we did that with some EMG, some high-speed film. We also used a thermal camera to see if he had like muscular hot spots that were maybe inflamed. And then we put a plan together between strength and conditioning, recovery, and then just a progressive rebuild so that all those muscles that he really needed to have activated came back into play like they should be. And part of that's just kind of, I think, wear and tear on the vehicle. He hadn't spent enough time doing some of the little things that his body needed. And so once we taught that to him, he said, oh, you know what? Things are starting to fire up again. I'm taking the time I need to get everything going. I'm going to be okay.
Wow, that's very interesting. How you guys take a look at every single detail and pinpoint like the something's wrong. Okay, this is the reason why. It's like an equation basically. You go throughout and start digging through each side. Honestly, it amazes me how you guys do that and how you can just pinpoint like somebody's issue. And that's amazing. That's amazing. So rebuilding Meb, how did that impact you working in distance running?
Well, it put me in a new, I guess, light to people. Oftentimes in our field, we don't really, people don't know that we're there because the work we're doing oftentimes is behind the scenes. But when the article came out in Runner's World about how he was rebuilt, in essence, it put a new spin that Dr. Austin was kind of this person that helped bring together teams that help athletes get healthy. And so as a result, athletes said, hey, here's someone with a lot of expertise. She truly does care. She will, protect you in the process and work towards trying to find people that can help us identify the right practitioners, put the right team together for us. Maybe she's someone that can help me with what I think is going on and make sure that, I have the opportunity Meb did. And so it put me in a little bit of a different light because, they didn't know I existed, even though I had existed for quite some time. And so once people know you're there, they tend to reach out and say, hey, can you help me too? The other factor to that is once you kind of have that reputation, people pass your email, your phone number, things of that nature along to others when they know that they're having an issue that's similar to what Meb had or to what they had and what I helped them with. And so it just made people more cognizant, more aware that I was actually there and that I understood the sport. And that's the thing at that elite level, and even really at the collegiate level, they said we don't have people that understand the sport well enough to truly help us with some of the, I guess, finer things that they're trying to resolve. Most of the time, the coaches know the general aspects, the, details of the run training, but they, sit there and say, how can you help me refine what it is I'm doing with the athlete? And that's what they're looking for.
That's great. That's great that it took your work and then it just launches it to millions or more people. And people actually know where you're at now, and know who you are and what you do. I think that's a bless. It's blessings.
I definitely wish I had you as a track coach. A lot of our coaches would just get on us for not performing like we should, but if we understood, whatever is stride, whatever everything that you break down, we might have even did better ourselves.
Yeah, it's really tough for coaches because the education process they need is just not readily sitting there in a package, I guess you could say. And because there's no package that you can walk up and hand a coach and say, look, if you listen to all the, podcasts or, read all the books that are in this package, you will be good to go. You'll be able to figure any athlete out. I think oftentimes they sit there and say, what do I know? What has worked well for me? And they go out and they implement it. And I think we have a lot of work to do in educating coaches and giving them the tools they need to actually be as successful as possible. It's a tough resource to actually build and grow just because, there's not that easy finance to it. Oftentimes colleges are really grateful when they even have a strength and conditioning coach or an athletic trainer that just is there to help them take care of some real basics. And so I think we just, need to develop a system that's a lot better for helping the coaches learn and put people into it that have been down on the ground. We're not so textbook. We know what the textbook says, but we've also had a lot of applied knowledge.
Right. Experience definitely the best teacher. So how can someone who has a low movement lifestyle, how can they become a marathon runner?
Well, there's a lot of people that have done it over the years. And I will tell you the ones that are the most successful are the ones that have been patient with it. And oftentimes people go, are you serious? I have to do what? And I said, yeah, I want you to jog 100 meters and then walk 100 meters. And sometimes that's the first session that they actually do. And they go, we're going to build this way. I said, yeah, then we're going to jog 200 meters and then we're going to walk 200 meters. And we don't push pace or anything like that. And so typically when people want to start out learning to do a marathon, we use a run walk or a jog walk approach to getting them to help build that volume and finding the volume that they can actually function at without any injuries and with being able to complete the distance they're aiming for without just being totally destroyed by time they're there at the finish line. So it's typically a run walk program that they're going to have to begin with. But once you get that down and you keep building the capacity to do the running on a certain amount of walking recovery, you see that with time, you can tie things together better and better. And, hopefully you have a coach helping you to guide that and build it.
Wow, I would never have guessed a run walk. That's a good approach.
I'm going to take notes right now. I'm taking notes right now as we speak.
Yeah. A lot of times I always ask people, I say, okay, how fast do you think you should be able to go for a marathon? And they'll come in and they'll say, I want to run 4 hours. And I'm like, okay. I said, what is, when you go out and just jog, what kind of a pace are you actually running? And they don't realize that a 4-hour marathon is actually 9-minute mile pace. And I said, okay, that's kind of a little fast. And so sometimes it's about helping people calibrate and understand what does really easy running feel like? Because now you got to do this for 26.2 miles, and then finding out what they're capable of doing for the marathon. Can we build that out over a longer distance? And so for many people, when they do their first marathon, it may be 5 to 6 hours long. That's okay. It's a good starting point, and they need to learn that it builds a foundation and a level of experience for them to then grow on.
Yeah. So I like that. I like the idea. So, for example, I'm gonna use me as an example, right? So I should start, jogging, walking. How long? How long do you take that for?
So I typically ask people to jog for 1 minute and then ask them to walk 1 to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Depending on how easily they recover. Everyone is just really, really different. It's also very dependent on the surface that they have to start out on. If we've got a nice soft trail, sometimes we can start off by doing, 1 minute of easy jogging, 2 minutes of walking. Whereas if you're on a hard surface like concrete, we'll say, okay, let's do 1 minute of easy jogging and 3 to 4 minutes of walking, just so the impact from the concrete doesn't ever injure them.
Okay. And
So
then yeah.
Yeah, we typically start there, and then I try to get the recovery to match the actual distance that they jog for. So like in the first example, if you run a minute and you have to walk 2 minutes, I then say, okay, can we run 1.5 minutes and then jog 1.5 minutes? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah. So I try to get them to, equal jog walk ratios. And I think that's a great place to start any first time marathon runner, because it actually helps them build that much faster of a marathon by doing that.
Is the type of surface that you train on, it matters only for injury, or is there other reasons that you change up for surfaces, or do you prefer a certain surface to train on?
I always prefer training people on a softer surface, and a lot of it is just the injury aspects. It's the concept of keeping them in the game more long term, just because the impact from a concrete surface goes up through your muscles, and it can just create really tight musculature, and they just, the ability to recover off of that just isn't as easy. So oftentimes I say, can we find a soft surface to run on, even if it's just like a grass soccer field or baseball field near your house, and let's use that to start rather than going and, hitting the concrete side of the equation. We don't do that until much later.
Wow.
Because marathons are mostly on concrete, right?
Yeah, and you have to condition people to handle that. Typically what I ask people to do is to fully walk a half marathon before they ever run an actual marathon on concrete. And a lot of that is just getting them accustomed to putting their foot in contact with the ground and hitting this harder surface over and over again. It's not that damaging when they're just walking. And then you teach them to actually build towards running that half marathon, or, doing a jog walk for that half marathon distance before they ever touch an actual marathon. So, a lot of times we have to build a way for people to easily move their bodies into dealing with concrete. Usually that's in their best interest.
Wow. I didn't know that. I always, started running and walking on concrete, like at high school, they got the concrete, laps. I just run there. I know it, as a starting point, soft like a grass, like a soccer field, and then progress yourself to a harder surface, so your knees won't get as much damage.
Yeah, that's the concept. So it's, it's not something that most people are taught. Oftentimes they just say, well, so-and-so down the street is doing it this way, I'm going to try doing it that way too. The other aspect to all of that is, joining a running group. Sometimes it's hard if you go there to have people to work with and train with, and they're all running on concrete because they're more experienced than you are, and they're not out on a soft surface. Sometimes it's going up to whoever the organizer is or who the coach is to say, hey, I'm new to the sport. How do I make sure I stay injury free? And is there a soft surface group that maybe goes out and that I can engage with? So oftentimes it's really helpful when you're starting out to find a beginner running group that is going to intentionally try to help keep people safe.
Alrighty, so for example, if I'm injured, right? How do I know if I'm ready to return after an injury?
Well, we typically tell people that you don't want to try coming back from an injury until you're pain-free. You have the range of motion in your joint that was there previously. And then we know that the athlete is ready to start coming back into it very slowly. Not full board, not at their 100%, but at a much slower rate and at a much more reduced volume. So at the end of the day, it's really about trying to minimize any potential for re-injury.
So I have another question within the question. So what do you think, what are your beliefs is when a pro athlete is injured, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they make the athlete come back too soon. What, as a coach, as like a nutritional coach on that, what do you guys feel like when you're in the background? You're like, no, that's not right. You should,
Yeah, if they're not 100% and they're bringing them back into competition, the question always is it's a calculated decision. Is it going to be worth it? So, the Olympic Games were coming up this summer and they've had to delay them. And going into the Olympic Games, a lot of times you'll have athletes with some type of an injury and they choose to manage the injury and go through the actual Olympic Games. And they do that because they've, the risk benefit or the risk benefit, ratio is just kind of in the favor of continuing to train while underneath the injury. We don't like athletes to do that, but if they feel like they can go and perform still despite the injury, they say, okay, let's keep going. In other instances, I've seen coaches make decisions to have athletes stay training, stay competing, despite the fact that they're not 100%, and that payoff is not necessarily going to be there. That's when we probably cringe the most as sports scientists or sports medicine professionals, just because we know it's not being done for the right reasons. And we try to encourage the coach or the athlete to really pull back and just take time to get healthy and do a much slower rebuild. But sometimes that's hard. It's not always our decision to make. With the Olympic Games being canceled, I will tell you that I'm sure there's a lot of athletes right now that are actually rehabbing something or even maybe having surgeries that will help them do better next year in 2021, just because they want to be as healthy as possible for the next 12 months. So oftentimes it should be a decision that the coach and athlete make with a team of highly trained professionals. But at other times, I will just tell you they choose to do what they think is best, and you do have to stand back. There's very little that you can do at that point except to make a recommendation.
Yes. And, another question from just a little 20 question about that. More on the business side of the Olympics and all that. This is just my personal question I had. Do most Olympic athletes, were they hurt with this Olympics going a year further because of their sponsorships and money and all that, or do they live off of the Olympics, or do they get regular jobs?
It really depends on the athlete and their sport. There are some athletes that will be in a sport like diving, and they'll say, you know what, I don't know if it's worth holding on to actually wait out another year because I want to start a family. I want a more normalized job. Whereas other athletes in a sport like track and field or especially marathon running, they may turn around and say, you know what, it's very well worth it because my sponsors are there. They're going to stay and be supportive. I know I've got that contract and I can postpone at least 1 year before going into, other parts of life. So for most athletes, it will be dependent on where they are in their own personal life, where they stand financially, and how supportive the actual sponsors are.
I know you talked about a second ago. You was talking about athletes coming back off injury. I know I played college basketball, and when you're injured, and even if you could play a little bit, coaches want you to play, and also you might lose your spot if you don't play. So I know it's definitely a tough decision. I know it makes y'all cringe a lot, but I don't know. For the last about 6 games of my career, I had played on a fractured foot, and I won't go and give it up. So I had to play, but since you say you've been in distance running for a while, how has it changed the performance of distance runners? How has it changed over the years? Even like including the science, like how the science has changed since you started.
I think, the biggest change has been the understanding athletes have towards what it takes to run faster, what coaches believe it takes to run faster. And really here in the U.S., something that's helped that or helped to create more of a large group of distance runners are these groups that are now funded by these shoe companies to give athletes at least a chance. It's a little bit more like, the East African countries where they do have groups that the athletes can go to and be trained. I also think that some of the technology is coming into play. We see a lot of controversy with regards to the shoes that are out there from these various companies, and so that's going to make it very, very, very competitive. The other factor that I think has made the biggest difference is just the ability to train in groups. Because the athletes have each other to push a good bit more, we're seeing a much higher quality of athlete come to the table over and over again in distance running. And so by having those groups, whether it's here in the US or the UK or Australia, wherever it may be, it has changed the game a lot because the athletes are now training full time with actual training partners to help get them there. Back in the day, it definitely was not that way. There were very few sponsored athletes, and so they pretty much worked full time and then tried to do the running on the side. So there's a lot of factors that have changed it, but I think the biggest has been the technology and the ability to train in groups and push each other.
So how's the evolution of the shoe, of the actual shoe, has changed? Like you can't put on any sneakers on it to start running. Now you need like running shoes. Now they make specifically running shoes. How's that evolved from like say 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Yeah, so for the most part, back in the day they had the waffle iron shoes that they created, and there's been a lot of technology that has developed the ability to provide a shoe that's far more stable, yet also give you cushioning. And here recently, it's been the addition of carbon fiber insoles or some type of carbon fiber and foam reconstruction of a shoe that actually gives kind of like a spring-loaded effect to the athlete to help propulse them down the road. And so that's been the big controversy here recently is that even ethical? Is it something that we should allow athletes to be utilizing in competition? Because it improves the running economy substantially if they are what's called a responder to the actual shoe. So that's probably one of the biggest things that's going to impact us going forward in distance running, and even in a variety of sports that can use that carbon fiber insert. We will see them change the game and change the performances that we see because of that. I think it's a lot like the bikes and cycling. Over the years, they have really done a lot of work to streamline the bikes you see people racing on. And essentially that's what they've done with these shoes is they said, okay, this is the equivalent of a bike for a distance runner. And so they're saying, how fast can we help someone go by giving them the best technology possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
And are you for or against the carbon fiber in the shoes? I know Nikes have a big push on it, but what do you believe? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a tough call. I kind of sit back and say, you know what? It's technology. It's not going to hurt the athlete's health. It's available to everyone. It's not intentional doping per se. So as long as everyone has access to it, go ahead and let them utilize it. Others would disagree with me and say, look, we're not getting the true runner. We're getting a modified runner, and there are those that respond to the shoes and those that don't respond to it at all. So it's not an equivocal playing field. I don't know where we'll finish on that. I kind of feel like it's the same thing as the bikes. And when it's the same thing as a bike, people have different bikes that they race on for international competition, and they're doing everything they can to make that bike go faster, whether it's the wheel or the weight of the bike. It just is all about speed and giving the athlete technology that puts them more to the front. So I think people will debate it for quite some time, but eventually, if they just come to a point where they say, look, these are the regulations around the shoes, and we're going to stick with this, then we have to go with it. That's the rules. And if one athlete benefits more so from a pair of shoes than another, it's probably a lot like a bike. If someone benefits from the bike more so than other people, well, then they have a little bit more of an advantage. And so because we've had these things in sport for so long, to me, we've always been dealing with it. I don't know that the shoes are necessarily anything different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of trials, and like you said, every athlete is different. We want to switch into nutrition a little bit, and wanted to know the difference from nutrition from today than it was, when you first started. I know a lot of things have changed over the years.
Yeah, I will tell you that the biggest change we've had is all the ability for people to put different thoughts out there to a very large population via social media, and for it to create a lot of confusion. I would say one of the biggest things we're lacking these days is the ability to have a sound voice with regards to nutrition that people can just easily turn around and listen to. Back when I first started, it was pretty simple. We didn't have the social media that we have, and either you sought out a professional like myself and got some help, and you're looking for someone with specific credentials, or you didn't have any help at all. So I think today the biggest challenge for most people is, who do I listen to, and who do I know, is going to give me something that will truly work. And what I tell people consistently is that in nutrition, there are no absolutes. You don't want to state something in absolutes because it could change tomorrow, because the research is not robust enough to always turn around and say, yes, absolutely, this will work. Now, are there some guidelines that you can use? Is there some relative information that is helpful? Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing that's changed is just the amount of confusion that people have and knowing where to go and get that help. But I will tell you that overall, our general nutrition guidelines have stayed the same ever since I was in sport. So it's been pretty consistent over the course of my career.
Let's say 30 years ago, right? All the food that we ate was organic food. Not me, but mostly my parents and everybody else, right? But food now has all this, supplements into it. You got steroids, you got, food coloring. Has that made a difference for the athletes too?
I think it depends on where you get your information from. I try to teach people to keep it as simple as possible. I don't know that we have meat products, animal products that are that contaminated with steroids or things of that nature that it would harm somebody. There's a lot of debate over that, and we always have the option to continue to buy organic products. So I think the biggest thing is, again, where do you get your information from? Do people teach you to go first and foremost to the whole food itself? So when I say that, I mean, okay, do they teach you to actually go to the produce section and buy all your vegetables, buy your fruits, don't get them prepackaged, just buy them as is, get your meats that way, get your breads that way, and take it home and actually use seasonings. Take the time to cook, and make yourself a good, healthy meal. On the flip side of that, Americans are very busy. And so they will go and get prepackaged meals and things of that nature that will have preservatives and colorings and things of that nature in it. And it may be impacting them. We don't know if it is impacting them that significantly, but I will tell you that the availability of that type of product is much larger scaled these days than it has been. But if we're doing things the right way, if you go back to someone with a good, sound knowledge of how do I optimize the food I'm taking in just for health, they should teach you to go back to those principles that we've had for over 40 years now. We've had it for a very, very long time. And so I think it comes back over and over again. Who are you working with and how are they teaching you to go about eating properly?
So you suggest definitely to go get your stuff fresh and then cook it like that, huh?
Yeah, I do. There's always those points and times where people say, can't I just keep a frozen pizza or a frozen meal, in the fridge for emergencies? And I always say, yeah, keep it in there for emergencies, especially if they have kids. They're just like, hey, sometimes I get stuck. And I say, yeah, I understand that. And I know that people are going to do it. But on the whole, I say, go buy your whole grains, your meat, your, dairy products, your plant-based products, whatever you believe in, your fresh fruits and vegetables, and cook as much as you can from scratch. Do it as all natural as you possibly can. When it comes down to oatmeal, don't go buy the prepackaged, throw it in the microwave oatmeal with all the sugar in it. Buy the steel cut oats, cook them in the, pot, right? And put them in the fridge and keep them and use them throughout the week. So it's about encouraging people to do that and learning to do it in a timely manner so that it's manageable throughout their week.
That's awesome. So talking about food and all that, what are the best foods for an athlete?
The best foods for an athlete are the ones that, help them to feel the best. So when I'm working with an athlete, we start out with what's called the macronutrients and taking a look at whether or not they're in what's called the macronutrient distribution range, or are they somewhat similar to where they should be. And because we start there, it gives us, kind of bumper lanes to operate within and start to say, okay, how do we get our macros into that range? And if we step out of that range, why are we doing it? Make sure we have a good reason for doing so and try to build their individualized program from there. There's no best foods except the foods that the athlete can be the most consistent with, but we do try to make sure that they're not ever missing in micronutrients. They're not ever missing in high quality proteins, that they don't have too much sugar or too much fat in their diet. So we try to take a look at all those factors and make sure the diet is first and foremost as complete as we possibly can. And for many athletes, that's a really long journey. They don't necessarily start out with it 100% perfect. But over time, what we find is that we can build to something that's pretty reasonable for them and that will keep them in the best place possible for them, depending on the type of training they're doing.
So is there a difference between performance nutrition and like a regular nutrition for a non-athlete?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the definition of performance nutrition, it means the intentional manipulation of food to create a training adaptation to enhance a specific performance outcome. So when I talk to people and they say, I want to do performance nutrition, I say, okay, well, what are those performance metrics you're going to use to evaluate whether or not we're doing something that truly benefits you? So when you do performance nutrition, that's where you have to start out. Conversely, the everyday person, we're sitting there just going, what's the distribution of your macronutrients and micronutrients? And are you getting enough of those factors to help you stay healthy? And we're not trying to influence some performance metric. And so that's really what differentiates the two. Very few populations do actual performance nutrition. I think for the everyday athlete, oftentimes, if they can get the general nutrition right, they can fulfill their actual needs in training. It's more of your elite athletes or your ones that maybe try to compete a bit more seriously as an age group athlete that are going to want to pursue the performance side. and trying to impact, how fast they recover, how well they tolerate different bouts of physical training. And so with that, we also oftentimes see athletes go down the road of using dietary supplements. They might use something like sodium bicarbonate or beta alanine to help enhance the capacity they have in training to get the most out of themselves.
Wow. Oh, that's deep. So for an athlete, right? So what is the best nutrition strategy to follow when recovering from a hard workout?
So when you're recovering from a hard workout, the first thing you want to focus on is repleting your glycogen stores. And the question is, how much time do you have to do that? For the everyday person, oftentimes you've got about 48 hours before you're going to have to do another really intense bout. Whereas in elite sport, or when they're a competitive athlete in college, or even in age group sports, sometimes they'll have that next really hard bout of training within a few hours of the first one. I know that's not uncommon in sports like soccer and triathlon or what have you. And so what we do underneath those circumstances is find ways to restore muscle glycogen very, very quickly. There are high molecular weight carbohydrates out there that, are powder form. We'll take those immediately post-exercise and let our body start to replete its glycogen stores, its carbohydrate stores, and then steadily continue to fuel our bodies with the carbohydrate it needs to try and fully recover before they hit that next training bout. Conversely, if you're the person that gets to wait 48 hours, we can have a more staggered approach to actually recovering the body's intake. And so we try to approach it just based on how long does an athlete have in between hard training sessions to recover their muscle glycogen and be prepared to go into the next bout. But typically we encourage them to recover that as quickly as possible, because the faster you recover, the more you should adapt to training and then be able to move forward.
Man, I could use some of this information when I was in college, I tell you. Them back-to-back workouts be killing me.
Yeah, they are very tough.
Yeah. So, what causes muscle cramps, and how do you treat them? Like, what's the best way for that?
So, muscle cramps can come from a variety of different factors, and I think for most athletes, I would say that it's never just one thing that causes the muscle cramps. Usually, it's a couple of different things coming into play, and oftentimes that's one, stressing the muscle harder than it is prepared to be stressed. And then secondly is the nutritional state the muscle's in. Does it have enough sodium? Does it have enough carbohydrate? Do you have enough fluid in your body to help that muscle stay functioning? And so it's when those two typically interact that we see people end up with actual muscle cramps and end up pulling off, to the side of the court or the side of the road, or what have you. And it's really just they've pushed the muscle past its actual capacity in some form or another, and it doesn't have what it needs to produce that contraction properly.
Wow, that's good. That's very informative. I'm writing all this down. Trust me, I'm gonna start running tomorrow and going at it after this talk we had.
Well, I'm glad you're ready to start.
So I have another question. I have this might be a sensitive question. So what do you feel when all this cannabis and all that is going through around now, it's being legal around all the states, not all states, but California, Colorado, Washington State, and athletes? Like the NFL just passed a new law for them that they could get smoke cannabis now. They won't get fined for it. For a distance runner and all that, and the the workouts or that, do you not say condone cannabis, but you recommend it or you stay away from it? What's your thoughts on cannabis?
So I think we're going to learn a lot in the coming years about products that are considered to be more natural in terms of their therapeutic value. But right now we have some guidelines that athletes have to follow. And first and foremost, if they're an athlete that falls under anti-doping rules, they do have to be cognizant that they cannot have marijuana in their system when they go to compete. So if they do a drug test afterwards and they have marijuana in the system, then they get popped, right, for a doping violation. Whereas outside of competition, they're actually fine to utilize it. And what we're seeing in a good number of research studies is that they're looking at the therapeutic value of marijuana. Now, for an elite athlete that wants to utilize marijuana, they have a process called a therapeutic use exemption that they can go through if for some reason they need to be on it, even as they go through competitive periods. Predominantly, they put that in place because they don't want athletes utilizing a substance like marijuana that could possibly harm other athletes. Okay, and so what you will see over time is that those processes for those therapeutic use exemptions will be adjusted based off of findings that say, yes, we can utilize this in a therapeutic manner and it's not going to harm other people or harm the athletes themselves. Now, for the everyday person, they may go seeking marijuana because they have said, look, I've been to the traditional physician. I'm having a variety of different issues, whether it's sleep issues or depression or what have you. And because there's research being done saying we may be able to use small doses of this to help people sleep better or help people feel better who are having medical issues, I think you're going to see people continue to go pursue it. Yes. We just have to, remind athletes that are underneath that whole anti-doping code, where they have to be on the day of competition. It doesn't mean they can't utilize it, but that there are certain rules around its use. So I think we'll see things like that continue to grow. And we just have to keep an open mindset. The pharmaceuticals that we have available to us today are not answering all of the questions. And so that's why you see people turning towards different alternatives because they're looking for an answer.
Is CBD under the anti-doping as well, or is it under regulations as well?
Yeah, so it is under regulation, and what you can find online are various organizations that make sure there is no THC in the actual product an athlete is going to use, because that's the key component that we have concerns about. So if you go on to like the Banned Substances Control Group's website, they've got dietary supplements that they've batch tested and said, look, there's no THC in here. These are ones that athletes are able to utilize. So they've just got to be cognizant of whether or not there's THC in the product.
Okay. And how long has the anti-doping and USADA been around? Like, I haven't seen them like more around like the last 10 years, 15 years. Because I'm really big to boxing and MMA, and you always hear athletes going on. Canelo Alvarez got caught with this, and how long has it been since it really got involved with the anti-doping and all that stuff?
Yeah, so back in 2000, USADA was established. I believe it was 2000. And that was when they started their official testing program here in the U.S. There have been various other aspects for anti-doping in place at a very low level prior to that, but USADA had not been formed until that point in time. And so I remember even as an intern with the United States Olympic Committee trying to get, knowledge around that because it was so new. And then they steadily continued to grow it. And what you're seeing in some of the more professionalized sports, whether it's MMA, UFC, NBA, NFL, is that those sports have had to incorporate those policies that were originally developed around Olympic sport into their policies as well. And so they have said, okay, what is it that applies to our sports? And what are we going to be looking at? And a lot of that's dependent on the amount of funding the organization has to put into actual anti-doping testing. If they don't have enough money, sometimes their anti-doping is actually relatively weak. But what you're seeing in a lot of the sports is that they're making a greater commitment to it, and they have to just put money into the pot in essence and make sure it's there so that the athletes can be tested and they can compete clean.
That's great information, and I'm seeing here that you're an author of a book. Performance Nutrition, Applying the Science of Nutrition, Timing, Injury Prevention, and Recovery for the Woman's Guide to Training for Triathlon. Where can people find that book?
So the book on nutrition, Performance Nutrition, Applying the Science of Nutrient Timing, is published by Human Kinetics. And so they can go online and Google it. They can look on Amazon and it's there. The other one that you read off is a book published by Human Kinetics again, but it's published by USA Triathlon. And it's their women's triathlon group that published it. And if you go on Amazon, or if you even just Google it, you should be able to find it. Put my name in, say with triathlon and injury prevention, and you should be able to pull up that book, and that chapter will be in there.
That's great. And where can our listeners find you? If they have any questions or they want to hire you for anything, consulting, where can they reach out to you?
So they can reach me on my webpage, which is KristaAustin.com, or they can email me, Krista@KristaAustin.com, and they should get a pretty easy response from me. Sometimes people reach out via Twitter, but there's a variety of different ways to get in touch. So they can feel free to reach out.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you're very easy to communicate with. There's some people out there that don't even reach back to you, at all. I'd like to say thank you for coming into the show, and then thank you for your time. Honestly, thank you for your knowledge, and this has been great.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me, and best of luck to you guys as you kick off this new podcast. I wish you a lot of success in the future. So,
Q, last thoughts before we leave.
It's all about eating healthy. Like Krista said, we gotta get the natural foods, get the stuff from not packaged. I love cooking myself, so I get those as well. So it's all about what you put in your body, and also that affects how your performance is. Know your body, study it, and I obviously talk to Krista because she got a lot of good information.
And we can do a deeper dive.
Yeah, we can do it deeper like that, And guys, thank you for listening today. Dr. Krista today. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.